Hi, my fellow humans. Today I'm joined with Steve Runs Chicago, and we are going to be just talking a little bit about your first marathon coming up, first outdoor marathon, right? So, with that being said, I just wanted to get you to come in on what's your background in fitness and how did you transition into being the runner that you are now?
Yeah, I mean, in high school, I did a little bit of track, but then kind of went into more of like a gym rat and actually competed in a couple men's physique competitions. So for more than a decade, I was just in the gym constantly, 5 days a week, and uh, then once I moved up to Chicago, because I lived in Florida for most of my life, I moved up to Chicago in 2018 and firsthand saw the Chicago Marathon run like right by my building. And just seeing like the crowd out there and the experience. And I even went like on Twitter or something, made a joke because I had to run across the marathon to get to work that morning. And I was like, I ran like 0.10% of the Chicago Marathon today. And then it kind of came like a challenge for myself. I was like, can I actually do this? And like, what would it take to get there? And, having the background, in track in high school, it just kind of, the wheels started turning and I just started running kind of some smaller races like 5Ks and 10Ks and, done a few halves over the last couple of years. And now we're going after the big one here in 23.
Hell yeah. Awesome. So running the Chicago Marathon is coming up in about 4 months, right? So talk to me a little bit about what your training process is right now.
Sure. I mean, this starting probably back in September really started building like a nice solid base. So the majority just easy mileage, but really working on increasing the workload over the week and, kind of making those longer runs, a bigger focus at the end of the week. Having a couple half marathons in between there is kind of a tune up to kind of learn pacing, learning about proper nutrition and hydration on the run itself. And that's kind of been the focus for that. I also do have a coach, which has helped greatly with helping program all of this, which I think is a huge plus to have if you want to take advantage of something like that.
Hell yeah. So as someone who runs a lot around the city, right, we know that the lakefront is an ideal spot. Do you have any inside information that like people might be interested in or that could help them out with that?
A key with running out there is know where the bathrooms are. That's a huge one to learn. So, you can use the beach bathrooms at Montrose. There's ones at Foster's Beach. If you want to go down even further south, I think there's one between Fullerton and North Avenue, and then even at Navy Pier. So it's like knowing where the water stops and the bathrooms are, I think, are key for running on the lakefront.
Nice. And in my experience there, I've only noticed the one at is it at Fullerton? Like that big like where there's always a guy out there like giving out water.
It's kind of on the beach area. It's like literally in between Fullerton and where that kind of building that looks like a ship is. It's
Yes,
in
yeah, yeah,
between,
yeah, yeah.
like right snap in the middle there. So
Sure. All right, so I want to get into the nutrition side of things for a little bit. So you've done some half marathons, you've done some 10Ks, and obviously you just run a decent amount. So what is that pre-meal for you or pre-run snack?
So I stress this to anybody that's like first getting into it. And the big thing is like consistency and not to change too much. So if you find a formula that works for you, you want to stick with that. And you definitely do not want to change something on race day. So for me, every morning it's exactly the same. I wake up, the first thing I do is throw a noon tab in 20 ounces of water, drink that down, have about 8 ounces of black coffee. And then I always do a toasted bagel with some jelly on there or some honey. And that's pretty much what I do about an hour and a half before I go out. If it's a longer effort run, something 10 plus mileage, I might also take a gel 15 minutes before I head out. But that's typically like the same protocol that I do on race day or any long run day as well.
Love it. Love it. Yeah, that's a common one, right? Just having that the stuff that like high glycemic index, something going to get that sugar into you, right? Those carbs into your blood almost immediately and be able to use that as fuel. right when you go out on that run. That's cool. So because the mileage hasn't been much more than like 13, you haven't really done a whole lot of like during your runs. You are taking a nutrition.
So I mean, for the halves, for example, the last one, just the Chicago 13.1, that was just less than a month ago. That was probably a gel, which I use Spring Energy, which is awesome sauce. It's kind of like an applesauce, but it's 180 calories per packet, which is pretty high considering, to most average gels are usually in that 100 range. So just for the half alone, I think I consumed one before the start of the race and three during the race. About every half an hour, every 3.5 miles is typically when I throw a gel down. And then in terms of hydration, I try to do, maybe 4 to 6 ounces every half an hour as well, to go along with that. So I usually carry a handheld at the beginning. Once I run out or through that, then I just kind of rely on the course hydration from that point on.
Love it. That's great, man. Because I think that people undervalue, like, and underestimate exactly like what that will do. We were just in Madrid for the marathon in April, and you could tell some elite runners just like towards the end they were just on the tree stretching because they had just cramped up, and you just knew that like they put in the effort, but they just didn't hydrate / take in the gels with that sodium in it, and their muscles just kind of didn't have it anymore. So can't stress that enough about not only that, but what I talk about in the program is being able to run, keep your pace, and still take in those gels, because it can be kind of a pain to like reach into your bag, pull it out, undo it, like and take it in, because it's all kind of coordination, and the time is still running, right? So like you got that on your mind too, especially for those trying to hit a specific time, but really like planning for that by doing that even in the shorter runs, being like, all right, well, I can take one of these while I'm out there on this 5-miler, just to see what it's like to be able to run while doing this. So good to hear that there's some other runners out there doing that stuff consistently.
And that's the thing too, is like, I can't stress enough, like practice makes perfect in that situation, just like you said. So the more you get used to, tearing that open or taking it on the run, the better you're going to be at it. And, not every gel is going to sit well with your stomach either. So there's some trial and error there. And like you said, sodium is a big thing too. I think sodium is greatly overlooked. And again, you got to find what amount works for you. Like I could tell you that, yeah, I take, 1,500 milligrams of sodium before a half marathon, and a little bit more throughout, but that may work for me, but it's not going to work for you. And really practicing that is going to be where you're going to kind of find your sweet spot.
1,000%. I like you were taking in every like 5K. I was taking in the Mortons, which is about 100 calories, like you're talking about. And then they have ones that had caffeine in it, and then ones that didn't. And I took the ones with the caffeine every other one. So I ended up taking like 6 or 7 of them throughout the race, and throughout the marathon, and I felt good. I mean, obviously, like towards the end, but you're gonna hit that wall. You're gonna have the energy like there. But like I felt pretty dang good, and I knew that it was because of that. And my client Casey, who's the one that introduced us, right? Like she had told me, it was pretty honest, that like she's done a marathon and like barely taking in anything but like an energy drink during it. It's like, yeah, no wonder why you can't finish these races, and they feel like such a struggle for you. You're literally depriving. I mean, you're the reason. The guy that ran the marathon, right, and died. Like he's probably just undernourished, right? Like because
Right.
we know that the human body can handle this. I mean, people do it in 2 hours or less, some, right? So it's not that. It's nutrition and hydration is the reason why pass, fail, death, or alive, right?
Absolutely.
So for me, I'm a big fan of good pizza, good ingredients. Nona's in Chicago is actually my go-to during my marathon training. Like really fresh ingredients, amazing cheese and pepperoni, essential fats, proteins, and complex carbohydrates, right? So that was mine. I want to hear a little bit about yours. What's your go-to meal after you get done with one of them big runs?
Well, after every run anyway, I come home, I'll do like a 30-gram whey protein shake. I'll throw a banana in there, a little bit of peanut butter. About a half an hour to an hour after that, I'll usually try to seek out a solid burger around town. So whether it's Small Schwal, which is one of my favorite spots, get a nice double cheeseburger over there with some fries and some of their cheese dip on there is just top notch post run for me.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and I hope people understand, because I think that it's one of the things in fitness where they believe like, oh, you have to eat, clean, or like, pizza or burgers, are just like, how can you do that? Like, no, man, if you exercise regularly and your body knows how to process the things, like everything is totally fine for you in moderation / like at any point, if you're burning the calories off, right? Depending on like how your blood levels are, cholesterol, all that stuff obviously needs to be taken into account. But I think that like one of the things I love about running and working out is like you can eat almost anything all the time, and you're like, this is great because like I know like I'm using this energy up, right? So that's great to hear. I'm also a big fan of peanut butter jelly. Like I'm gonna throw that one in because that's just, it's got the simple sugars, good tasting, and like it's easy to digest with some water or milk, right? So that's it's one of my other ones.
A big one with runners too, which I'm a total fiend about, is Pop-Tarts, which I mean, that's basically just a simple sugar, but I mean, it's calories. And when you're burning thousand calories on a single run, I mean, like you said, everything in moderation. And, I came from the wheelhouse of like, it's got to be chicken, rice, and broccoli 6 times a day, evenly spread out. And that's just not a sustainable lifestyle for one. And if dial in your macros correctly, and at least for running, I mean, there's so much fuel requirements that you can kind of just make sure you're hitting your protein markers and you're probably good just from that aspect of it. But maybe unpopular opinion, but I love the fruit flavored Pop-Tarts. People that like the brown sugar and s'mores, they can go kick some bricks, but that's one of my favorites as well.
Comment below. Are you team fruits or are you team brown sugar around here? Let's find out. Awesome, man. So I want to talk to you a little more because it was interesting to find out that you were a lot more strength based, right, and physique before you got into this running side of things. And going off your Instagram, it seems like you've always been this like elite runner, right? Like you're getting ready to do your first marathon. So I'm really interested to hear about that because I think that that's a piece that many runners. People who say they want to get in shape, right? And because of however the culture has been, that it's like cardio is going to get you to lose the weight. And if you want to lose weight, you're going to run. And like actually the data suggests differently. It's actually strength training that's going to get you there. Now, not to say that running doesn't have its place because cardio is amazing for the heart. The heart's like the best muscle we got. If you don't have that thing working, you're not working, right? So, but with that being said, talk to me a little bit about your strength and then the physique, how you prepared for that.
Well, at least how it pertains to running is like typically, I try to at least do 2 strength sessions a week along with my running. And depending on how seasoned you are with it, you could do a little bit more, you could do a little bit less, depending on your training schedule. But I think the rule with that is like doing a little bit of something is better than nothing, right? So even if it's just body weight stuff for a half an hour or 20 minutes at home a couple times a week, I mean, that's going to far exceed not doing anything. And it's going to really kind of help, with injury prevention and kind of strengthening some of those weaknesses that you might have because of your gait or maybe a past injury or whatever the case may be. So yeah, I mean, I kind of focus on just a couple days a week, generally mostly single leg exercises to really kind of help balance out both sides, because let's be real, running is just basically hopping on one leg to the other, in its most simple form. So a couple days a week with just mostly single leg. I do like your squats and your deadlifts for more of the power aspects of it. I'm typically staying in that 8 to 12 rep range. If I'm really just primarily focusing on strength, maybe just 5 reps of particular exercises with the heavier weight. But most of the stuff I would say is probably in that 8 to 12 range for that. And again, a lot of abs, a lot of core work. And you do use your upper body quite a bit. So a lot of back and chest, because you are moving those shoulders, and having good posture is important while you're running as well.
1000%. I think people undervalue and underestimate a couple things there. One, that like core endurance like is a big part of keeping your running form, especially later in the race. Yes, upper body strength and lower body strength, they work hand in hand. Just because you're on your legs for most of it, like doesn't mean that like this doesn't take energy, right? And I have found too, especially as I try to build up my pace, that like my swinging of my arms really can take some of the load off of my legs as far as momentum is concerned. So making them stronger, making them have more endurance really allows to help you keep that pace. What are the similarities between training for a long run and training for a physique show?
Really, I think the similarities really only run in one particular area, which it's consistency. So, there's going to be days that you don't want to show up and you don't want to do those long runs, or you don't want to head to the gym to do a lifting session. But the only way you're going to reach your goals or, improve your time per se, is by just being consistent and getting out there and doing it.
Nice. I think that's a very valid point. Just to go back, because I think we asked, but then we got interrupted. The tracking your macros. Do you do that while you're training for the marathon?
So I kind of do more of like a check-in of sorts. So like, after maybe a week or two, I'll kind of go in like MyFitnessPal is usually typically the app that I use. And I'll just kind of like scan or type in everything that I'm eating just to kind of know where I'm at essentially, and kind of compare that to, how much energy that I've been utilizing throughout the day and running and training and whatnot. And that kind of just gives me a ballpark and like, am I hitting what I need to hit, or am I low in certain areas? And then I'll make those adjustments kind of on the fly. Being in the gym and being in physique for so long, like I can eyeball a lot of stuff because I'm just used to weighing it and looking at it and kind of knowing what that looks like. So not everybody's going to have that advantage. But MyFitnessPal, I think, is a great free app to kind of track your macros and kind of see where you are. And it's a good way to know whether you're making adjustments or not, or need to make adjustments.
1000%. Couldn't agree more. I'm also a guy that, I told people, on my YouTube, I maybe 20% of the time since I've been doing this fitness gig, and for, it's been like 10 years, I'm all in on it, but like, I don't, once you do it for even just a week or two, like you just know, right? Because we eat mostly the same thing. So as long as you're like checking in with that on the app, and then also assessing how you feel, right? Because I think that there's a strong correlation. I've had a couple clients be like, man, I was really fatigued on the end of that run. My muscles just aren't there. And I'm like, okay, well, what did you consume during that? Right? Because we go to in our head, like, oh, I'm just weak right now. Like, not necessarily, right? Or, man, that run got me, or that workout got me. Yeah, but what was your post meals? Oh man, it's like work came up. I honestly had to, skip the meal, and then I thought it was too late to eat. And I was like, that's why you're really sore as well, because you got to give this body what it needs to recover, right? So it's nice to hear that you do that as well. And like, I think the important factor is it doesn't have to be meticulous about it. Like just to check in, right?
Yeah, and along that, we've covered nutrition, we've covered hydration, and I think another big portion of that is sleep, like really getting quality sleep. And you can't expect to run 14, 15 miles on 4 to 5 hours of sleep, and if you're not eating well, I mean, that's just, or going out drinking too much the night before. I mean, like those are all going to put you in a bad situation, and you're wondering why you feel like shit towards the end of the run. But to kind of go back to the point, like sleep is, if not the most important, the second most important behind nutrition. So that's definitely one that we need to focus on as well.
Really glad you brought that up. I think that that's something that I undervalued definitely for a long time. And the more not only the research too, but just like your own experience, right? Like I feel amazing when I get that 7 to 8 hours of sleep and I'm ready to go, and then a good like mid-afternoon Sunday nap too is really nice after a long run too. Really great. Let's move on to talking about your gear. So I want to know exactly just a little bit. Do you have any like clothing recommendations for a good set of shorts that has like some pockets? If not, that's okay too. But like, what's the shoes and why? And then anything else that you want to add in on that?
Sure. Well, shorts for one, I wear just about the same thing every time. I just have, I don't know, 15 pairs of them, but it's the Nike Aero Swift half tights. The newest version, which is the dry fit version of those, actually have a full zip pocket in the back, which I think can hold 3 to 4 gels in that pocket alone. And then it has 2 drop-in pockets in the back that can hold a gel apiece. And then they have 2 smaller pockets in the front, which could be like keys, or you can fit a smaller gel in there too if you needed to. I've done that several times and it doesn't slip out because the waistband kind of holds it in place. So with those, I mean, you could easily get 5 or 6 on there, no problem, and a set of keys. I don't think that pocket, it's not secure enough that I would trust putting a phone back there. It would be kind of jumping around if you like to carry your phone with you. I'm not a phone guy. I don't bring my phone on any of my long runs or during race day either. But those are my go-to shorts for sure.
Love it. What about shoes?
Shoes, I mean, I do some testing for road trail run. So I have access to a lot and I have a lot. So I'll just kind of cover a couple of my favorites at the moment. For most of my intermediate runs, like my weekly runs that are not long runs, I usually go for the Skechers Razor 4, which surprises a lot of people. I think a lot of people underestimate and undervalue Skechers as a running performance brand. They're solid. I mean, I like those for anything under 8 miles. I'll also throw an honorable mention in there for like the Hoka Mach 5. I think that's a really good, could be used for tempo, but it's good for easy mileage as well. Again, I'd like to keep that under 10 because it's not a huge stack. And then for like race day, a couple of my favorites. So like 5K, 10K, obviously the Nike Vaporfly Next Percent. I'm kind of keen on the original one. The number 2, I like okay. The number 3, I like okay. But there's something about that original one that just speaks to me. And then anything like half or full marathon, right now my favorite is the New Balance SC Elite V3. There's, I don't know, just the energy arced in that, and the foam is just super comfortable. The shoe fits really well, and I could just see running tons of miles in those.
Oh yeah, that was a great answer. You know way more about shoes than I do, that's for sure. So cool, good to know. I think that if you're interested in like what you might need to run, just go ahead and like do some research on those right there. Thank you so much for that.
Absolutely.
Let's see here. Do you use a heart rate monitor?
I don't. So I kind of rely on my watch, which I know is not the most accurate in the world and it can be off at times. But I mean, at least for me, like I use the Coros Pace 2 and it's pretty consistent with the numbers at least. So I trust it to some degree, but I don't personally use a heart rate monitor.
Okay. Do you vary your runs between like a slow pace and tempo and then interval speed work?
Oh yeah. Right now, again, it's a lot of base mileage for the most part. So most of my runs are easy runs, but once I think after this block at the end of this month is up, I'll start integrating more speed work, you know, maybe like once a week on Wednesday to kind of get that tempo and threshold paces.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's one of the things that like I found out from this last training cycle I did was just how much like those slow runs actually help with the long runs or with the speed right towards the end. Like just the body being able to handle that oxidative state, right? The transferring of those nutrients to your body. And I undervalue that because I'm always like, no, if you want to run faster, you got to fucking go faster, you know? Like, and come from the military, like just be like that's how we did it, you know. But then now, actually, just to understand, like, okay, you gotta, and I think that also the weight training kind of didn't help with that too because it's progressively overload, right? So, like in my mind, it's like no, in order to be able to run faster, you just progressively run faster, right? Like, but very important note for those that are trying to get better with their time. you got to slow down. You got to be able to be at that. If you're not using a heart rate monitor, right, being able to have conversations with people while you're running. I think that's what I learned from running with someone. Is like we were able to actually talk to each other the entire time. It was never like an out of breath moment. And while that might seem almost like, okay, well, what's the point of this? Because it's not too tough. It's training your body to run for that long still. And like, so it's not to be undervalued. Very important point. So I'm glad to hear you're doing that as well.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up too, because I mean, that's one thing I see in a lot with some of these training groups is people are running their long runs every weekend at the pace they expect to run the marathon at. And that's just not the way that you do that. One, that's going to lead to burnout and increase in injury risk. But I mean, just like you said, it's got to be a conversational, pace. Like your easy runs should be easily 2 to 3 minutes slower than your 5K pace. And it should definitely not be your marathon pace for every long run. I mean, please, like you said, slow down. Please slow down.
Yep. And the logic says, right? Like, I want to run this pace, so I need to just continually run that pace. But like the data says and the runners show that, like, no, that's not the case. And I think it takes that belief in it first, but then like when you do it and like you actually run the race, you're like, oh, holy cow, like it did work. And by the way, not as much strain on your body and on your heart, right? Because like that's the other thing that I learned was like, wow, man, by taking it a little bit easier, I was able to do better. My only I've only ran 2 marathons, and the first one I ran out of gas, and I think a couple reasons, right? One, proper hydration and salt intake, 1000%. Around mile 17, I'm around Chinatown. I reached back to like stretch, and like my whole lat like seized up on me, and like I was just like limping in the rest. And I'm running like a 325 pace like the entire time up until that point. And I came in just like a little under 4 hours because I just was trotting, running off straight ego at that point. And the other thing I really didn't do during that training cycle is run slowly. And so those 2 things, I was like, okay, now that I know these, let's go ahead and implement them. And I took almost 20 minutes off of my next marathon time. And it was 7 years between that gap, right? I was like 20, or I just turned 30. I'm 36 on this last one. So like the gap between, and to be able to be like, oh wow, man, those are easy fixes, right? But you have to like buy into like what the research shows and do it, right? And then carb loading, baby. I think that people don't understand that. You got to fill those muscles up with as much glycogen as possible to be able to last, right? Because obviously during it, but it's an important point. Like 3 days before, right? It's not just like, I need to fuel pre-race. It's like, no, it starts 3 and 4 days before the race just to get a little bit more.
Absolutely.
Let's talk a little bit about your sports. Do you do anything else like while you're training?
I don't. I mean, and the main reason is just injury risk. Like being 37 and you being 36. I'm sure you can point to that. Is like, man, it takes like one wrong move on a soccer field, or one wrong swing of a golf club, and boom, like you're out for a couple of weeks. And like, when you're putting this much time and effort into training for a marathon, it's like, I don't want those outside, possibilities. I've taken my dog for a walk and he's seen a squirrel and it dragged my foot right into the lip of a sidewalk and had a swollen big going into a 5K. And it's just like, these things happen, but if anything I can do to mitigate those, I'm going to do it. So.
Agreed. And that's a valid point. At first I was like, all right, maybe we won't include this question, but your answer is, that's great, because I think that's very important for people to understand that if you're going to commit to this, right, for that 4 to 5 months, like commit to this, because the reward will be great when you get there. But yes, the sacrifice is those things. So lastly, I want to talk about just music, right? Are you a music guy? Are you out there with them headphones on? What do you got going on?
So when I was in the gym and competing for physique and stuff, it was always like some classic hip hop, throw some Eminem on there, some Dr. Dre, some Ludacris, some hard rock every now and then as well, some metal. But I don't know what happened, but over like the last 2 years, I completely stopped listening to music at all. So
Wow.
my long runs, any of my runs, no music whatsoever. And a big thing that I like about that is like, I like hearing my own footsteps for my cadence, and I like hearing my breathing. As before is like, sometimes the music like can hype you up to a part where now all of a sudden you're running a little bit faster than you should be, or you're not listening to your breathing and you're maybe breathing a little bit heavier than you thought you would, and you're not changing your effort based on that. So I just kind of really like listening and hearing my body, and it's kind of peaceful and kind of just running through my own thoughts as opposed to being distracted by music. So yeah, I mean, over the last 2 years, I don't use music at all now.
I love that. I love that answer. I think that running without, I'm not a fan of that. I'm actually going to do a yoga certification in a couple weeks, and just honing in on the meditation and being still part, because it's something I really got to work on. Like, I'll move all day long, but trying to get me to sit still for 15 minutes, that is a task, right? So I'm going to be working on that. But with that being said, it's an important note on that, because you said something about cadence, because that is something that is very important. And with a heart rate monitor, for those who are interested, right? I use a polar heart rate monitor, and it is hooked up with my watch, and she'll chime in on my earphones and say, you're above your heart rate range that you're supposed to be, right? Because I'll get lost in the music and start going. So if you want to still have music, be able to zone out and still keep your pace, they do have the instruments now. The technology is set up to where it will remind you where you're at and where you should be, and whether you're building fitness or not. So sometimes it can be a little annoying. I'm like, all right, I get it, right? But I just keep doing it. Damn it, Dre, you get me too jacked up right now. I got to slow it down. Put on some Adele, all right? That's great to hear. I won't waste any more of your time, man. This is amazing. Thank you so much. Good luck out there. I'm sure you're going to crush it. Sounds like you know exactly what you're doing. So, and as we talked about, things come up. So like, stay injury free, keep doing what you're doing, and keep making me laugh, man. The Instagram shit's good. So good stuff.
I appreciate it, man. Thanks for having me on, and let's get these comments rolling below. All right.
Yeah, hell yeah. All right, brother. Have a good one, man.
You too. Take it easy.